I was standing at the county clinic checkout, my newborn heavy against my shoulder, when the nurse slid a warm printout across the counter. The printer clicked once, and she asked, almost gently, "Ma'am, is the father Mark Stiller?" My mouth filled with iron as I read the name again, my sister Ruth's husband, beneath the words, probability, 99.99%. I had named my daughter Ruthie after my sister, and the room tilted like a slow, mean wave. "Come again?" I said, though I'd heard it clearly. She tapped the paper with a pen cap. "This pulls from the state partner database. It matched your previous kit and a listed profile. We can do a confirmatory test if you'd like." "What if I don't put a father's name on anything today?" "You're not required," she said. "You can leave that field blank." Ruthie made a little bird sound in the sling, the kind that always made me smile. I didn't smile. "Where did that name even come from?" I asked. "I didn't type it." "It looks like he opted in to family matching," she said. "Some people build trees." "Do they build graves too?" I asked, softer than I meant to. She blinked, kind but careful. "Would you like a social worker?" "I would like a delete button," I said, and my voice shook, so I looked down and signed the retest form like it was a receipt for groceries. The paper felt hot. The room felt colder. "Results take about a week," she said. "We'll call." "Do you have someone who can be with you?" "I have my sister," I said, and heard how that landed. She slid my insurance card back. "Take your time." I didn't take my time. I folded the printout into fourths, then eighths, then smaller still, until it was a hard little square I could hide under my thumb. The hallway smelled like bleach and grape suckers. Shoes squeaked. A baby somewhere started crying, and for a second I thought it was mine. At the exit, the automatic doors opened like a mouth that didn't know whether to swallow me or spit me back. Out in the parking lot, the sun was bright and rude. I buckled Ruthie into her car seat, fingers clumsy, the strap catching on her blanket like the day itself wanted to hold her tighter. My phone buzzed. A text from Ruth. "Send me a picture of my namesake, you slowpoke. I want to see those cheeks." I took a photo without thinking, her little hat, her sleepy mouth, and my thumb hovered over the paper airplane until it sent itself. "Look at you," I said, voice small in the empty car. "Everybody loves your name." A man pushed a stroller past my bumper and nodded like we belonged to the same quiet club. I nodded back and felt like a trespasser. The printout burned through my coat pocket. I pulled it out and unfolded it, then put it in the glove box and shut it like I was closing a drawer on a mouse you didn't want to know was there. I started the car and turned the radio on low. A woman was talking about the weather, about a front moving in, about cooler nights and blankets. I turned it off. At the first red light, I rehearsed a story I'd already told people. Anonymous donor, medical reasons, end of conversation. The light changed and I didn't move. Someone honked and I went, hands at 10 and 2 like a student on her first day. "Ma'am?" The nurse called from the sliding doors behind me, jogging with my insurance card held up. I braked, waved, rolled the window down. "You dropped this earlier." "Thank you," I said, taking it with fingers that didn't feel like mine. "I keep dropping things." "Newborn phase," she said, smiling. "It gets better." I nodded like I believed in the future. At home, the house smelled like laundry, and the coffee I never got to drink hot. I laid Ruthie on the couch cushion beside me, and watched her make faces in her sleep, like a tiny person arguing with a dream. I took out a pen and a scrap of mail and tried to write a list. Call clinic, confirm, retest, ask about what? How a name leaves your sister's mouth and lands on your child's birth certificate? How a mistake gets printed in black and ends in a crib? The pen made a small dot on the envelope and then stopped. I couldn't think over the sound of my own memory. My phone buzzed again. Ruth sent a string of hearts and a voice note. "I can smell her from here. Bring her by tomorrow? I'll make soup." Her laugh bounced in my kitchen the way it always had. I held the phone to my chest like it could quiet the part of me that wanted to cry and the part that wanted to run until the soles of my shoes fell off. Another buzz. "Mark, everything okay with the tests?" Like he had ordered a package and wanted tracking. I typed, deleted, typed again. "They're running another panel," I wrote finally. Paperwork got confused. He wrote back fast. "Good, those things glitch." And again slower. "You're not saying anything to Ruth." I stared at that sentence until the letters started to look like little fences. The furnace kicked on. The vent by the couch breathed on my ankles. Ruthie made a sound like a surprised hiccup, and I put my hand on her belly to feel it rise and fall. "I won't lie for you," I said. "To the silent room, to the glove box, to a week from now." I heard my late husband's name in my head and put it down, like a hot pan on a cold sink. I wasn't going to use him to make my choices look better. The clock over the stove ticked too loudly. Somewhere, a neighbor shut a truck door. The whole world kept doing its small chores while mine sat in the glove box and waited to be opened again. I put Ruthie against my shoulder and walked the length of the hallway and back. A slow patrol of a house that had always felt safe. My lips were close to her ear. "It's okay," I whispered. "It's okay." I tried to say her name. It stuck in my mouth like a pill I couldn't swallow. I said it again, quieter. "Ruthie." It didn't sound like a promise anymore. It sounded like a test I wasn't sure we'd pass. I held her a little closer and tried to make the word true in my mouth. It wouldn't go down. It wouldn't come back up. I didn't order a scandal. I said to no one, because saying it out loud steadied me. I ordered a panel. At the clinic I had tried to explain that. It was for medical history, I told the nurse. Newborn screening. I wasn't looking for anyone. She nodded in that trained, gentle way. Your earlier kit was on file. The system cross-linked it and auto-matched a participating profile. Sometimes relatives opt into family matching. It pulls from partner databases. Relatives, I repeated, like the word might choose a different shape if I chewed it longer. So the computer just picked a name and printed it. It matched a profile that appears to be public, she said, with a family tree. Whose? I asked, even though the paper was already saying it in hard, calm ink. She glanced at the screen. Mark Stiller. Hearing it out loud had been worse than reading it, like watching someone else speak with your mouth. I want a retest, I said. I need a retest. Of course, she said. We'll do a confirmatory panel. It's common to verify. It's not common, I said, and then bit my lip, because none of this was her fault. She slid the swab across the counter. Open your mouth for me. 10 seconds. I counted to 12 because 10 felt too easy for what we were about to find out. When she asked if I had someone at home, I said, my sister, and I watched her face flicker, the way people do when the next sentence is going to hurt. Back at the house, I stood with Ruthie and remembered why I'd given her that name. After my husband died, Ruth had kept a light on in her kitchen for weeks, a little beacon I could see from my porch. She washed my hair when I couldn't lift my arms long enough to do it. She sat on my floor and folded laundry and left notes in my shoes. Eat, sleep, walk. When the baby came, I thought, I'll borrow that light and give it a name. It felt like honor. It felt like a promise I knew how to keep. Anonymous donor, I had told people, practicing. I don't want to talk about it, I had added, when they leaned in with their soft, curious eyes. I'd believed I could build a clean fence around my story and keep the world on the other side. But a government printer didn't care about fences. It cared about matches. It cared about names. The nurse had offered a social worker. I said I didn't need one. Then I went to the bathroom and splashed water on my face until I looked like someone steadier. On the way out, she touched my elbow. We'll call you, she said. A week or so. A week, I repeated, like if I said the number it would shrink. In the parking lot, the paper warmed my palm the way a small animal warms your hand before it bites. I folded it once, then again, like smaller meant safer. I only needed medical information, I said to Ruthie, as I buckled her into the car seat. I wasn't trying to unmask anyone. She blinked at me like that was between me and God. I drove home and practiced my 2 lines. Anonymous donor. I don't want to talk about it. I said them out loud to the windshield. They sounded like receipts I was trying to pass off as love letters. The worst part was remembering the day I filled out the birth certificate. The clerk had asked for the name and I had written it with a little ceremony in my hand, the way you write the first line of a letter you want your whole life to answer. Ruthie, I'd said to the room, to the air, to myself. After my sister. The clerk smiled and stamped something that made it official. I pressed the new printout against that memory like I could rub one out with the other. It didn't budge. The phone on my counter lit up. Mom, how are my girls? Send me a picture of Ruthie and her aunt. I could see it in my mind, Ruth's face beside mine, our cheeks touching like we'd grown up framed that way. I set the phone down and let it buzz until it gave up. The nurse's words kept looping those clinical pairings and that tidy phrase about family trees. I saw Mark's careful hands building shelves in Ruth's garage last summer. The way he measured twice, and still ran his palm along the board like he didn't trust numbers alone. Of course he'd build a family tree and polish it like furniture. Of course his name would be on it like a brass plate. I walked to the glove box and took the paper out, then put it back, then took it out again. It felt wrong to let it sleep in the dark. It felt worse to hold it in the light. I should tell her, I said, and my voice wobbled enough that I sat down. I tried to fix the story with words I could live inside. There was a glitch, I said to the room. They'll call and say it was a glitch. The sentence bent under its own weight and lay there, thin and flat. Ruthie squirmed and made a little squeak. I picked her up and pressed my nose into her soft hat and breathed like that could keep both of us upright. My mouth found the old lie one more time. Anonymous donor, I whispered. I don't want to talk about it. The lie sounded embarrassed. The truth sounded like a doorbell you couldn't unring. I carried her to the car because I needed motion. Because I needed the small certainty of buckles and straps and the click that says something is held. The evening sun flared off the hood, and my hands remembered the practiced dance lift, tuck, strap, pull. I smoothed the blanket over her legs. Ruthie, I whispered, and the name felt heavier than the car seat in my hands. I set the car seat in the hall, and the weight of her name dragged me backward. To the last night something had felt that heavy in my hands. It was 3 months after the funeral. Mark drove me home from our mother's house with the truck heater going and the wipers slapping a rhythm that wouldn't let me think. We'd spent all day sorting drawers, her aprons folded into neat old lady stacks, Dad's pocket knife found behind the bread box, my husband's baseball cap somehow in the linen closet, like it had been waiting for me to open the door and fall down. You don't have to stay in that place alone tonight, Mark said, eyes on the road. Ruth's down with the flu. I can come back after I drop you. I'm fine, I lied. The word tasted like cardboard. The storm followed us home. Branches scraped the truck like fingernails. He put the blinker on at my street and I didn't tell him to turn around. When we got inside, the power was out. The house was cold in the way of places that haven't heard laughter in a while. He used his phone to find candles and set 2 on the coffee table. The little flames made a soft yellow circle, and everything outside it looked like a story I didn't want to be in. Let me check the breaker, he said. Don't, I said too quickly. It's fine. It wasn't fine. The quiet had too many doors. He stood there with his coat still on, rain ticking from the hem. Do you want me to go? I should have said yes. I should have been the adult in the room. Do you want to sit for a minute? I asked instead, because my mouth was a traitor and the couch looked like a boat and I was too tired to swim. He sat on the far cushion. I brought 2 glasses of water and put one between us like a fence. Thanks, he said, but he didn't drink it. We didn't talk about the boxes or the cap. We didn't talk about my husband or the way grief made the clock hands heavy. We listened to the storm try all the windows like a burglar testing locks. It's a bad one, he said finally. It is. He glanced at the hallway. You sleeping okay? No. I could lie to the nurse, to the form, to the future, but not to that. Not really. His hand lifted, hovered, then landed on my shoulder in a way that felt like someone putting a warm towel on a shivering dog. I closed my eyes for a second because Mercy is a fast learner. Show it a door and it walks right in. We shouldn't, I said, opening them. I know, he said, not moving his hand. I leaned my head against his coat because it was there and the house was cold and I was a woman who had forgotten how to be held without breaking into pieces. I thought, just this, just warmth. 5 minutes. I thought, this is what people mean when they say they didn't mean to. It wasn't a romance. It was a silence we filled badly. The candle hissed and guttered, and he cupped his palm around it so the little flame could keep pretending it was enough. I said, "Thank you for driving me." And he said, "Always." And those were decent words. Nothing indecent fits cleanly inside them, but it can hide behind them if you want it to. "Stay until the power comes back," I heard myself say. "On the couch. I'll take the bed." "Okay," he said. But neither of us stood up for a minute. The fence of water between us didn't grow taller when I needed it to. I could have built a wall. I reached for a glass. We kissed once like we were trying not to, like neighbors bumping shoulders and calling it an accident. I tasted rain and sleep and every wrong thing that wears a mask that says mercy. I pulled back first. "No," I said, and it came out broken. "No," he nodded. He moved to the couch and pulled off his boots. I went to the bedroom and shut the door and leaned my forehead against it like I could press the night into a smaller shape. The power came on around 3. I heard the heater stutter awake. The house sighed. Morning arrived with the kind of light that shows all the scuff marks you pretended not to see the day before. He made coffee. He stood in my kitchen like he'd just fixed a shelf, and nothing more. "We don't tell Ruth," he said, not quite looking at me. "It would wreck her." "Don't say it like we saved a child from a river," I said. "I'm saying it like we don't set fire to everything for one mistake," he said. And then he put his hands on the counter like that made him reasonable. "One mistake," I repeated. The words clicked together like teeth. He left with the empty coffee cup and his careful calm. I washed the cup twice, like that could change the water's opinion of us. I told myself for weeks that we had pressed the wrong buttons in the dark, that grief is a bad electrician and flips whatever switch is closest. I told myself it could stay buried if I packed it small and labeled the box something boring, seasonal, or old towels and put it on a high shelf. When Ruth came by with homemade bread, I fed her slices and nodded at the right parts of her stories. "How are you sleeping?" she asked, buttering a second piece for me because I was losing weight I didn't intend to lose. "Better," I said. The lie sat on the plate and shone. She hugged me at the door, her chin on my shoulder the way it had been when we were girls and hid from thunderstorms in the hall closet. "I'm here," she said, "always." I shut the door and leaned against it again, because I was a slow learner with doors, and shame walked the hall like it lived there. Later, when I held Ruthie and felt her breath warm the notch of my collarbone, the past sent a cold draft under the nursery door. I tucked the blanket tighter, and it still got in. This was the part the pamphlets don't tell you. How motherhood makes all the clocks louder and all the wrong nights closer. She exhaled in her sleep like a tiny sigh for both of us. I set her name into her hair and felt the wind of that old house come back, the candle, the fence of water I didn't keep tall enough. I told myself once more that a single mistake could stay buried right up until the paper in my glove box began to burn. By morning, the heat in the glove box felt like it had crawled into my chest, so I buckled Ruthie in and drove back to the clinic. The waiting room smelled like lemon cleaner and old magazines. A cartoon whale on the wall smiled at me like it knew something I didn't. "Back so soon?" the nurse asked, kind without being nosy. "For the retest," I said, "and whatever you need for her." "We'll do both," she said. "You and the baby." She handed me a clipboard. "You can update any information while we set up." The form had a line that said father's name. My pen hovered over it like a plane that couldn't find a runway. "You can leave it blank," the nurse said softly. "I know," I said, but the pen didn't move. I accidentally wrote my name twice and wanted to laugh at myself, but it came out as a breath that sounded tired. In the small room, she took the swab from its packet like it was delicate. "Open," she said, and I did. 10 seconds felt longer when you were being counted by someone else. With Ruthie, she was gentler than I knew how to be with my own guilt. "All set," she said, labeling vials with letters and numbers that would decide things people should have decided with their words. "We'll call you." "When?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "A week or so," she said. "Maybe sooner." I nodded and tried not to look at the line on the form again. I folded the paper face down and slid it back like it might burn the counter. In the car, I texted Mark one sentence. "We need to talk." The bubbles showed up, went away, came back like a fish that didn't want the hook. Finally, "When? About what?" I could see him even in the font. Careful, measured, 2 steps ahead. I typed. "This afternoon. The test." And then, "Coffee Depot, 3 o'clock. He sent back a thumbs up, the kind of emoji you use when you want to look casual about a house fire. I spent the hours in between pretending to nap while Ruthie slept on my chest. Every 5 minutes I checked that she was breathing, as if this were the thing I could control. At 3, he was already at a table by the window, facing the door like a man who understood entrances and exits. He stood when he saw us, smoothed his sleeve, straightened the napkin holder, and sat back down. He put a sugar packet in line with the others like they were soldiers. "How's the baby?" he asked, eyes cutting to the car seat, then to me. "Alive," I said. "Hungry. Human." He nodded like we were making a grocery list. "You got the retest?" "Yes. And?" "They'll call," I said. I took the printout from my bag and set it on the table without sliding it toward him. "This is the first one." He kept his hands on his coffee. "It has to be a lab error. Those databases are messy. People upload wrong information all the time." "It pulled from your family tree," I said. "It matched your profile." "Exactly," he said, brightening like he'd found a loophole. "My tree is connected to a bunch of people. Second cousins, whatever. It could be triangulating wrong. I've read about this. False positives. False positives don't put your name on a line that says probability 99.99, I said. They put maybes. This didn't. He lowered his voice. "What are you planning to do?" There it was, the tone he used for bills and schedules. I had heard it when he told Ruth to move her dentist appointment because the dog had a grooming. I had heard it when he reminded her to put the mail out with the red flag up. I heard it now and felt myself slide into the slot he'd saved for me. "I don't know yet," I said. "I'm going to tell her." "You can't," he said. The words were soft, like he was offering me a blanket. Ruth is fragile right now. She's strong, I said. She's always been strong. You and I made a mistake, he said. We don't need to turn it into a life. We wait for the retest. We accept the glitch. We move on. I can help. Quietly. He talked like he was laying out a Tuesday trash day. Pick up dry cleaning. Erase the past. Help how? I asked. I can cover what you need, he said. Diapers, formula, a fund. We don't have to attach names to anything. He adjusted the cup so the handle faced exactly 3 o'clock, the way he liked clocks to behave. You don't get to manage this, I said. You don't get to manage me. He sat back, that calm coat slipping but not falling. I'm trying to protect Ruth, he said. You're trying to protect the version of yourself that looks good in your own head, I said. Ruth deserves the truth she can use, not the lie you can live with. His jaw worked. He glanced at the car seat. Are you putting my name on anything? I left a line blank today, I said. It felt like standing at the edge of a dock and looking down. He pushed his coffee away, wiped an invisible ring with a napkin, then set the napkin straight. Don't do anything until the retest comes back, he said. Promise me that. I don't make promises for your comfort, I said. I'm done with that. He exhaled once through his nose, the way he did when the mail was late. You named her after Ruth, he said, like he was handing me my own choices with a smirk. You see the problem. I see the promise, I said. I'm going to keep it. A couple behind us laughed too loudly at something, and the sound jarred the table. The printout slid a half-inch. Mark's eyes fixed on it like it was a loose thread on his sleeve. Let me see, he said. You've seen it, I said. Let me hold it, he said, palm open, patient, as if evidence behaves better in bigger hands. I looked at his palm, at the neat little lines like lanes of a road that always led to him. I glanced at my daughter asleep in the car seat, mouth open, unaware of all the names the world wanted to put over her. Then I took the paper and folded it in half, then in half again, crisp corners, sharp edges, the way you fold something you don't want to blow away. He reached for the printout and I folded it once more, smaller than his hand could claim. By Sunday, Ruth had me on her calendar with 3 words, pot roast today, and a heart. I told myself showing up was normal. I told myself normal could hold me together for 2 hours. Her house smelled like thyme and clean sheets, the kind of clean that isn't showy, just certain. She opened the door with a dish towel over her shoulder, and that soft look she gets when she's about to fuss over you. There she is, she said, reaching for the car seat before I had both feet inside. Come here, little namesake. Careful, I said, and then pretended I didn't hear my own voice shake. Ruth lifted Ruthie like she'd been practicing in her sleep. Prettiest little namesake I've ever seen, she said, rocking without thinking, her chin tucked, the exact posture I used to copy as a girl when she held our cousins. Look at these cheeks. Look at this nose. Mark was at the dining table setting forks with the tines facing up, the way he likes. Hey, he said, quick eyes at me, then the diaper bag. Traffic okay? It was fine, I said. I put the bag on a chair near me. He watched it like it might reveal a trick if you stared long enough. Ruth didn't see the look pass between us. She was busy narrating Ruthie's fingers. She's got pianist hands, she said. Long little knuckles. She'll have options. We'll give her options. That's the hope, I said, and felt something press hard behind my ribs. Swallowing felt like smuggling. The roast was already resting on the stove. The potatoes wore butter like a promise. Ruth moved around the kitchen like a song she knew by heart. She tied on her old apron and wiped her hands and kissed the top of Ruthie's hat. Sit, she said to me. You're a guest. I can help. You can sit, she said again, smiling. That's help. Mark poured iced tea like a man auditioning for Husband of the Year. He slid a glass toward me and angled the coaster under it with 2 fingers. His eyes flicked to the diaper bag again. Need me to hang that on the hook? He asked. It's okay there, I said, and I moved it closer to my foot. We ate. Ruth made conversation easy for me, like always. Weather, the neighbor's lilacs. A TV show she promised I'd like but I'd never watch. Every time the baby squeaked, she made that soft "oh" sound mothers make, like an apology to the air for anything loud. Hold her while I get the gravy? She asked, and before I could answer, she tucked Ruthie into my arms. Warmth climbed my neck. The wrongness climbed with it. Mark passed the bowl and let his fingers brush mine in what might have been an accident and might have been a reminder. Careful, he murmured. Like I didn't know how to hold a baby. Like carefulness could fix a printed name. Ruth sat again and looked at us like we were a photograph she loved. "This," she said soft. "This is right." The pressure under my ribs turned to a hard shape. I took a breath and it didn't move. "The clinic called about the newborn panel," I said before I could stop myself. Ruth looked up, alert but calm. "Everything okay?" "They're rechecking something," I said. "They needed another swab." "That happens," she said, nodding. "Everything's always 2 steps when you just had a baby." She reached across and squeezed my wrist. "I'll come with you next time if you want." Mark cut a piece of roast he didn't taste. "Labs are always a mess," he said, too fast. Ruth smiled at him. "Remember that time your cholesterol got flagged, and it turned out the nurse put your birthday in wrong?" She laughed. "We almost overhauled your whole life because you were born in 74 instead of 47. He laughed with her and didn't look at me. I pushed the diaper bag farther under my chair with my heel, and the paper inside made a tiny stiff sound against the canvas. After lunch, she brought out a laundry basket from the back bedroom. "I found something," she said, bright with the joy she gets when she finishes a project. She lifted a folded quilt and shook it once, the pattern blooming like a field. "I started it the week you told me you were trying," she said. "I kept sewing through your nausea and through my flu and through every show I pretended to like with Mark. Tiny stitches, see? I wanted it to look like time." I reached out and touched a square with stitched vines. My throat closed. "It's beautiful. For Ruthie," she said, placing it in my arms. The weight perfect, the cotton warm from the dryer. I was going to wait until she was bigger, but I couldn't. The world finally feels right with a baby in it. Mark leaned his elbows on the table and looked at the quilt like he'd contributed more than a paycheck. "You always did good corners," he said. Ruth smiled at him, then at me. He hates when I say this. But quilts save winters. They keep people from saying things they can't take back. I almost said it then. I felt the sentence queue up in my mouth like a train pulling into the wrong station. I saw myself say Ruth, and I saw her face change shape, and I saw a year unspool in one terrible second. I started, and Ruthie hiccuped, a tiny frog sound that knocked the air out of me. Ruth laughed and kissed her forehead. "She does that when she's happy," she said. "She's like you that way." Mark's phone buzzed and he stood too quickly. "I'll take this," he said, already moving to the hall. He put his hand on the diaper bag handle as he passed, and I slid my foot onto the strap. "Leave it," I said. My voice came out even, like the edge of a table. He let go, smiled at nothing, and stepped away with his call like he was just a man talking about gutters. Ruth tucked the quilt under my arm firmly, like she was fitting me for a piece of armor. "Promise me you'll use it," she said. "Don't save it for nice." "I'll use it," I said, which was true, just not in the way she meant. She brushed a hair from my cheek. "Look at us," she whispered. "We made a whole person and a whole Sunday. It took a while, but we got here." I nodded, and the nod did the job of a lie without having to be one. Mark came back smiling his public smile. "Everything okay?" Ruth asked. "Fine," he said. "Just the contractor." His eyes slid to the bag one more time. I stood, set the quilt on my lap, opened the diaper bag, and reached in for the hard little square of paper with its calm black ink. My fingers found it like a stone in a river. Then, while Ruth was still looking at the baby, and the light was kind and the house smelled like thyme and clean sheets, I lifted the edge of the quilt and made a small, neat pocket among the vines. I slid the printout under the quilt as if tucking in a blade. Ruth moved to the sink and ran hot water over the plates, and I sat there with the quilt across my knees like a secret with flowers on it. She said, "Let them soak." But she was already humming and stacking, and I stood up because my hands needed something to do besides shake. "I'll get the porch glasses," I said, and slipped outside with 2 cups that didn't need carrying. The evening was soft and a little damp. Wind chimes did their little argument. The boards under my feet remembered where we were children. The door clicked again, and Mark followed. Careful footsteps, careful face. He leaned on the post like he owned a stake in gravity. "What did you do with it?" he asked. "I put it away," I said. "Where?" "Safe." He nodded, the way men nod at weather maps. "Good. We need to keep this between us." He said it in that tone he used for trash day and mortgage payments. Reasonable, inevitable. "Because?" "Because Ruth can't take shocks right now," he said. "Her health, she hasn't been sleeping. You've seen it." "I've seen her up with a fever and still making soup," I said. "I've seen her carry other people's bad days in one hand and the groceries in the other. Our marriage won't survive this," he said, lower. "It will kill what we've built." "What you've built," I said. "Don't do this," he said, palms out like he was calming a horse. "Let me help." Quietly. "Your help wears a leash," I said. "It wears a plan," he said. "There's a difference." Inside, water ran, and Ruth laughed at something the baby did. The sound reached the porch and landed in my chest like a small, warm weight I didn't know how to hold with him watching me. He took a breath, put his voice into that soothing register. "I'll set up an account. Automatic. No strings." "Strings are just the parts you pretend are invisible," I said. "They still pull." "Please," he said, and the word sounded practiced. "Wait for the retest. If it confirms, we can manage it. Name it donor. Keep the paperwork clean. We don't have to break anything." I looked past him through the kitchen window. Ruth had a dish towel over her shoulder and was rocking the baby with one foot while she rinsed plates. She sang under her breath, something old from the radio, and smiled at the steam. "Remember when she signed up for violin?" I asked. He blinked. "What?" "The adult class, Thursday nights," I said. "She was happy for 3 days straight." "It was expensive," he said. "Too fast. Adult hobbies are expensive." "You told her to cancel," I said. She smiled like it was no big thing and made room for your calendar. I watched her practice disappearing in small pieces. He rubbed his jaw and looked at the railing. "We were budgeting. You were arranging," I said. "Just like now." He let the porch take a silence. "I'm trying to keep this family from exploding," he said. "Do you understand what happens if you say it out loud? She loses sleep. She loses trust. She loses the story she thought she was living," I said. "And then she has a chance to live a true one." "You're turning a mistake into a life sentence," he said. "It already is a life," I said. And the word felt like the only honest thing on the porch. He stepped a little closer, hands in his pockets, that gentle smile that always made people think he was the calm one. "You named her Ruthie," he said, soft like he was reminding me of a bedtime story. "You don't want that name to cut." "I want it to mean what I thought it meant," I said. "Light left on. A person you can count on." "Then don't do this," he said. "Protect her. Protect Ruth." "I won't protect you from the truth," I said. Inside, a plate clinked, and Ruth's voice rose, talking to the baby about bubbles in the sink like they were tiny moons. The domesticity of its soap, steam, a clean counter made the lie he wanted feel extra shiny and extra wrong. Mark shifted, still blocking the doorway without touching it. "I can fix things," he said. "That's what I do." "You fix things by labeling them and putting them where you want," I said. "You fix people that way too." He stared past my shoulder at the dark yard like it might offer him a script. "What do you plan to say?" "Exactly. That I made a mistake," I said. "That you did too." "You'll ruin her," he said, but there wasn't conviction in it. There was a habit. "She's not porcelain," I said. "She's a person." "People break," he said. "They also heal," I said. "But not around a lie." He laughed once, a little breath with no humor. "You don't know what you're inviting." "I know what I'm ending," I said. He shook his head and did that small straight-in-the-world gesture post, sleeve, the air itself. "So you'll throw a grenade into my house. I'll hand your wife the pin you already pulled," I said. He swallowed. "If you tell her, I can't control what she does." "That's the point," I said. He looked at the kitchen window then. Really looked. Ruth was swaying in place, cheek to the baby's hat, soap dripping from her knuckles because she forgot to put the plate down before loving something. He dropped his gaze. "Please," he said again, and this time it sounded like a man afraid of the mirror, not the storm. I reached for the door. My hand shook. The knob was warm from all the faithful uses it had survived. "I will tell her," I said, and the porch light hummed like it finally chose a side. I went back inside and wiped my hands on the dish towel like I just needed air. I kissed Ruthie's hat, thanked Ruth for dinner, and drove home on autopilot with the quiet pressed up against my ears. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I fed the baby, packed a spare onesie, and pulled the hard little square from where I'd tucked it under the quilt. I put it in the bag like a stone. On the way over, I texted her. 10 minutes? No emergencies. Please." She replied before the next light. "Always. Come." I parked crooked and didn't fix it. I strapped Ruthie to my chest so I couldn't drop anything important, and walked up the steps with the bag bumping my hip like a truth trying to get out. Ruth opened the door with her hair in a knot, and that soft morning face she saves for family. "Tea?" she asked, already turning. "Give me 10 minutes," I said, and heard my voice sound older than both of us. She poured anyway. 2 mugs, steam lifting, lemon slice floating like a small sun. She set them on the counter and put her palms flat, ready for whatever this was. I'm going to tell this wrong, I said. Out of order. Tell it any way you need, she said. Grief first, I said. It was big and it was everywhere. After the funeral, I didn't know how to walk from the couch to the sink without losing pieces of myself on the floor. Her eyes shone, but she didn't interrupt. There was a storm, I said. The power went out. I was cold in a way blankets don't fix. Mark drove me home from Mom's. He brought in candles. We sat. I put a glass of water between us like a fence. It wasn't a romance. It was a silence we filled badly. She didn't flinch. She reached for the back of the chair and held it, like the room had tilted a little. I'm sorry, I said, and it came out raw. I'm sorry. She tipped her head, like the apology had weight she needed both hands for. Keep going, she said, almost kind. I thought it was buried, I said. Then the clinic matched a name. I pulled the folded paper from the bag and set it between the mugs. It matched this. She looked at the square like it might open its mouth and talk. She didn't touch it. What is it? DNA, I said. From the newborn panel. From my kit months ago. A crosslink. It did the arithmetic. She steadied herself against the counter, eyes moving like she was doing her own math dates. Nights, deliveries, all the small logistics that make a life believable. She didn't cry. She let one long breath out like she'd been holding it since last winter. How long have you been carrying this? She asked. Since Thursday, I said. But also since the storm. She nodded once, like a judge writing something down that didn't change the verdict. We didn't drink the tea. The lemon went pale and sank. Ruthie made a sleepy sound against my chest, and I pressed my palm to her back, as if that could convince time to be gentle. Keys hit the door. Mark's voice came in ahead of him. Hey, contractor's running. He stopped when he saw us at the counter with the paper between us. The way you stop when you spot a snake and your brain argues with your feet. He tried a smile that didn't fit. Everything okay? I didn't look at him. I looked at Ruth's hand where it rested on the chair. Knuckles pale, steady. I'm telling her, I said, as if I hadn't already started. He moved toward us like a man approaching a ledge. Let me... Ruth lifted a hand without looking his way. A small, quiet signal. And he shut his mouth so fast I heard teeth. It scared me more than his noise ever had. I want to see it, he said, softer. We should make sure it matches your profile, I said. Ruth took a breath that sounded like a winter door being opened. She reached out, pulled the paper to her, unfolded each crease with those neat fingertips that make perfect quilt corners. She read. Her face didn't fall. It assembled itself into something I hadn't seen before, something made for heavy lifting. Probability, she read, and her voice did not break. She folded the paper back on its lines with more care than I had given it, and set it down like a hot pan. I'm sorry, I said again, because there isn't a better word for a wound you helped make. She looked at me finally, eyes clear, not kind and not cruel. I asked you a question, she said to Mark, though she hadn't, not out loud. He blinked. What? How long have you known? She said. His mouth opened, closed. We were waiting for the retest. We, she repeated, and the word did not want him in it. How long? He glanced at the clock like time might provide cover. Not long, he said. A few days. It might be an error. She nodded slowly, then faced me again. And you? Since the paper printed, I said. Since the nurse said your husband's name out loud. I see, she said. Mark found his voice, louder now, trying to take the room back. It was one night. It was a mistake. We don't need to set everything on fire to feel righteous. Ruth didn't look at him. She picked up the untouched tea and moved it to the sink, like making space for something else to live. Her hand shook once, then stopped. Ruth. He tried again, softer, reaching for the tone that always made people lean toward him. Let me fix it. She lifted that same small hand and he went quiet again. And the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was like a drawer sliding open. Leave, she told him. And I realized the word wasn't only for him. He left. Not with a slam, not with a speech, just a zipper and a duffel, and the particular quiet of a man who believes he can still come back and find the furniture where he left it. Ruth stood at the sink and washed the untouched tea down the drain like she was rinsing the room of a smell. I held the baby and didn't try to say anything wise. The fallout wore normal clothes. Mrs. Klein from church left a casserole on my porch with a note that said, God sees all, underlined twice in cheerful pen. A voicemail from an aunt ended with a prayer that sounded like a warning. Lord, Put a hedge around our family and keep out the wolves. And then she added, "You know who?" Like God needed directions. A cousin texted, "Just checking in," and arrived with a tote full of muffins and a phone that never left her open purse. The little red light glowed between the lipstick and the keys. "Say how you're feeling," she chirped, too bright, too interested. "It's good to process." I stared at the purse until she pretended to turn the phone off, and then only zipped it halfway. "I'm feeling done being furniture," I said. She blinked, not sure where to put that. "Well, okay. Let me know if you want me to talk to Mark. He and I go way back." "I know where you go," I said, and walked her to the door. Mark texted, "We can settle this without making it ugly." Then when I didn't answer, "I will get a lawyer." It read like a man threatening weather. I found one of my own, a woman who wore flat shoes and had a voice like a straight line. "What do you want?" she asked. "Protection," I said. She nodded. "Then we get everything on paper and stop trying to negotiate in kitchens." The clinic called in the middle of the afternoon when sunlight made everything too honest. "We have your confirmatory results," the nurse said. "They match the initial report." "Same name," I said, though I knew. "Same name," she said. And it was colder this time because there wasn't any shock left to soften it. I called Ruth and gave her the sentence without the padding. She didn't make a sound for 3 full seconds. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay. Say if you want me to go away," I said. "I'll go. I'll move. I'll sign whatever makes breathing easier." "You're not leaving your own life," she said. "We're deciding mine." "I'll give you my car," I said. "My house." "I don't want your car." "The house then." She was quiet a beat. "I don't want your house," she said, but her voice had a fray in it, the sound of a woman measuring what's fair and finding no numbers that add up. "I can rename her," I said, the words scraping me on the way out. "If that helps, I can change it. I can make it something new." "Don't say that on a day when I can still smell her shampoo," she said softly. "Not today." "I'm trying to give you something," I said. "I know," she said. "That's what makes it hurt." At night I learned the new map of my hallway. How the floorboards announced you even when you walked like a thief. How the light under a closed door still stained the carpet. I carried Ruthie like a passport and made circles until she slept. Then made a few more because stopping felt like asking for something I hadn't earned. When I did sleep, I dreamed in paperwork. Boxes you check with pens that run. Lines you write your life on. A space that asks for father and stays blank like a dare. Ruth answered my texts in short, accurate sentences. "I'm seeing a counselor," she wrote. "I'll bring you food on Thursday." Then, "Do you need diapers?" She was still the woman who made lists and kept people alive with a calendar. Mark left 3 voicemails in a row, and then one that was only breathing. I didn't call back. He sent a picture of a receipt for formula and a caption, "Helping." I sent back a picture of the baby's foot and wrote, "Human." The lawyer met me at a wooden table that already had pens lined up like they were waiting for orders. She read aloud in a voice that made every sentence sound like it would exist whether I wanted it to or not. "Parental responsibility," she said. "Decision-making authority. Physical custody. Visitation. Support." Each word landed on the table and sat there, small and heavy. "I don't want to weaponize her," I said. "You want to protect her," she said. "Those are different things." Ruth came by one evening with soup I couldn't taste. She set the pot on the stove and looked around my kitchen like she was cataloging everything that would stay if she didn't. "I'm going to need time," she said, not looking at me. "I'll give you all of it," I said. She nodded and reached for a glass. Her hand hovered over the cupboard like she was trying to remember where I used to keep the cups before the world tipped. "I moved them lower," I said. "For one-handed days." She didn't smile, but something in her face softened like a muscle letting go. "My counselor says the body tells the truth before the mouth does," she said. "My hands have been shaking." "I know," I said. "Mine too." We sat at the table and didn't eat. Ruthie hiccuped. I offered the name again because it felt like an offering shaped like grief. "Say it and I'll change it," I said. "Say it, and I'll take it off the birth certificate before it dries." She shook her head once. "Don't put that on me," she said. "Not yet." When she left, she stood in the doorway too long, like the house would answer a question if she listened hard enough. "I loved you first," she said, not accusing, just filing a fact. "I know," I said, and the fact didn't make me smaller like I expected. It made me steadier. Days made a quiet ladder and I climbed them one at a time. People kept arriving with pies and advice and eyes that wanted to know if I would cry on schedule. I learned how to say, "We're okay," in a way that meant, "We are not okay," without inviting more casseroles. When the envelope came from the county, it was brown and official and looked tired from carrying other people's news. Inside were forms with words I had already met: custody, support, acknowledgement. My lawyer tapped the line that wanted me. "Here," she said. I held the pen and thought about fences that were too short, and doors that let in drafts and quilts, stitched with tiny vines, like a map back to a life. I thought about Ruth's hand hovering over the cupboard and finding the cups lower than she remembered. I thought about a baby's breath warming the space under my collarbone, about the house learning my new pace in the dark. When the custody envelope came, I signed Mother in a hand that did not shake and wished signatures could kneel. At dawn, my phone rattled against a water glass like it had something urgent to say. I was already awake, watching the ceiling turn from gray to honest. Ruth's name lit the screen. "I read his old tablet," she said without hello. "The one he swore he wiped. Come." "I'll bring the baby," I said, because leaving Ruthie behind felt like leaving my pulse on the counter. "Bring her," she said. "I'm not asking you to plead. I want you to listen." Her kitchen smelled like coffee and paper. She had the tablet on the table, 2 phones, a legal pad, and a pen that clicked like a metronome when she was thinking. She poured coffee and didn't hand me any. "It's not a fluke," she said. "It's a habit." She slid the tablet over. Threads of messages scrolled compliments tucked into logistics, emojis used like doors left cracked, names without last names, numbers saved as first initials and places: S. Pilates, V. Hardware, J. Choir. The sentences were small and slippery. "You free after? That dress. Coffee? Delete later." I thought I was the explosion, I said. "I was just the one you could see." She nodded without looking up. "He's been splitting the days like firewood." Her finger tapped dates. "Look, my flu week, the week of your mother's house, the month he told me adult hobbies were expensive." I winced. "I remember." She held up the legal pad. Across the top she'd written ledger. Under it 2 columns, consequence and pattern. In consequence, she wrote my name and 1 hard fact. In pattern, she wrote his, and a list that made a sound in my throat I didn't recognize. "This isn't about blame," she said, calm like a judge who had finally slept. "It's about what happens next." I strapped Ruthie to my chest so I couldn't fold in half. The baby let out a soft morning squeak. "Do you hate me?" I asked. "I'm using the part of my brain that keeps people alive," she said. "Hate will have to wait." We went through the clumsy little lies like receipts. Contractor at 3 when his location had him near the brewery. Late meeting when a good night landed in another woman's chat at 9:06. A note about picking up violin strings on the same day he told me to cancel class because adulthood had a budget. He thought women wouldn't compare notes, she said. He thought we'd each be furniture he could rearrange. I put my palm on the table to keep it from lifting. "I had one night," I said. "That doesn't make it smaller, but it makes his bigger." She clicked the pen closed. "It makes the map clearer." At 8:30 she texted him, "Come home, now." He walked in like he always did, trying his smile on the doorway first. He saw the table and his mouth did that small straightening thing, like it could iron out facts. "What is this?" he said, then corrected himself. "What do you need?" Ruth didn't raise her voice. "Sit." He didn't sit. He looked at me. "We can talk later," he said, privately. "No," Ruth said, and the word drew a line on the floor. He pointed at the tablet like it had wronged him. You broke your own," she said, and pushed the ledger forward, 1 finger on each column like she was teaching someone to read. "I'm not here to debate. I'm here to establish terms." "This is ridiculous," he said, but he sat. She laid out phones, timelines, screenshots. She had printed 2 messages and circled the timestamps in red. "That's the night you told me to take the dog to the vet alone because you had inventory," she said. "Inventory apparently wears perfume." "Ruth." "No," she said again, and that was the last time he tried her name like a key. He aimed at me. "You of all people." "I know what I did," I said. "Stop using me to blur what you are." He leaned back, changing tactics, reaching for reasonable like a jacket. "What do you want? Money? A schedule? I can be generous." Ruth slid a page across the table with her handwriting at the top. Boundaries. The word was neat enough to frame. She read, "You will not enter my home without written permission. You will communicate about the child in writing. You will attend counseling if you want a shared calendar. You will not name what we did something smaller than what it is." He smiled like a man in a seminar. "And if I don't sign this worksheet?" She stood, went to the counter, came back with his ring of keys, house, shed, mailbox, and set them on the ledger. The sound was small and final. "Then this is goodbye. If you sign, it's a beginning with rules. You can't keep me from my wife," he said. "I'm not," she said. "You already did that." He looked at me. "Is this what you wanted?" "No," I said. "I wanted a different life 5 years ago. That's not on this table." He laughed without joy and scratched at the place on his wrist where his watch made a pale circle. "You're both overreacting." Ruth took a breath and slid another page across. "Also this," she said. It was a list of pickup days, hours, and a note about not introducing anyone new to the baby without discussion. "You don't get to," he started. "Edit?" she said. "You don't get to edit me anymore." The room went quiet enough to hear the refrigerator click on. Ruthie shifted against my chest and sighed like a person considering sleep. I rocked a little without thinking. He stared at the keys, then at the door, then at the life he'd been managing like a spreadsheet. "You're serious," he said, finally meeting Ruth's eyes. "Yes," she said, and the word fit her face. He stood and opened a cabinet without meaning to, the way muscle memory reaches for old comforts. He shut it. He looked smaller. "You'll call," he said, trying future tense on like a shirt. "We'll write," Ruth said. He left his ring of keys and took the one for the truck. He didn't slam the door. He moved through the house like he didn't want to wake something that mattered more than he did. On his way out, he reached for the duffel we all pretend doesn't live by the door for emergencies. He slung it over his shoulder and didn't look back. We listened to the engine catch, then fade down the street. The house breathed. Ruth sat slowly, like someone setting a heavy box on the right shelf. She put her fingertips on the ledger, then on the list, then on the baby's foot where it peeked out of the sling. He left with a duffel and silence. We stayed with a baby and a list of rules that finally felt like ours. We stayed at the table until the coffee went cold and the pen stopped clicking. The baby's foot twitched against my shirt, a little reminder that the room had more than one future in it. Ruth looked at the list again and then at me, and I heard myself ask the question I'd been holding like a hot coin. What about her name? She didn't answer right away. She rested her palm on Ruthie's back where the fabric rose and fell. "She can keep it," she said, steady. "Not as a trophy. As a promise. We can make a name honest, by how we carry it." "It won't hurt you to hear it?" I asked. "It already does," she said. "But the hurt is mine to hold, not hers to fix." I nodded and felt something unclench behind my ribs. Not relief, exactly permission to keep walking. We opened our calendars like two mechanics looking under a hood. "Holidays," Ruth said, drawing small boxes. "We'll plan them before they sneak up and make us mean." "Doctor visits," I said. "I'll text from the waiting room. You can come to the shots if you want. Or don't. There's no right answer." "What will we tell her when questions grow teeth?" she asked in a voice that made the air behave. "The truth in pieces she can chew," I said. "We start with love. We add the rest when her hands are big enough to carry it." We wrote that down like it was something a judge could measure. We wrote who'd pick up antibiotics, who'd keep the spare car seat, who'd hold the extra house key, for emergencies that aren't about men, Ruth said, and the corner of her mouth lifted. Forgiveness didn't show up like a song. It arrived as errands. I handed Ruthie to Ruth while I ran into the pharmacy and came back with gas drops and travel tissues and a chapstick I didn't need. The next week she texted, "Lasagna on your porch. Eat it warm, not polite." I set the pan on the counter and cried into the steam, then laughed because she'd taped the recipe to the foil with a note. "Add more salt than you think. The world steals it." We started sharing a quiet assembly line of small kindnesses. She sent me a picture of a thrifted high chair and wrote, "It wipes clean." That's the only theology I'm sure of. I sent her a video of Ruthie discovering her toes and wrote, "Proof of joy." And she wrote back, "Admissible." Some nights we moved through grocery aisles together like a two-woman parade, pushing a cart that squeaked and arguing cheerfully about the right spaghetti brand. A laugh would sneak up and startle both of us, the kind you catch like a ball and throw back before you can decide if you deserve it. People from church saw us and whispered, and we let them, because we had better work to do than translate. There were bad days. Days when Mark sent a curt message that sounded like a court filing. Days when my mother called and asked me to reconsider the way you're handling the optics. And I hung up and sat on the step until Ruth came and sat next to me without making it a lesson. There were nights when the baby screamed from 6 to 10, and the house echoed with the kind of noise that makes you bargain. Those nights, Ruth showed up with a swing and a stopwatch. "We trade," she said. "You eat while I bounce, then we switch." I learned the geography of sleeping again. Lights off, small lamp on, porch light decided. I put the quilt on the back of the couch like a flag we were still allowed to fly. When a draft eased under the door, I rolled a towel against the bottom and laughed once at myself for thinking that would work, then watched it work. On a Wednesday that didn't think it mattered, we sat at her table with a stack of mail between us. She skimmed an insurance letter and made a face. "You know what I miss?" she said. "Being boring. Taking a nap without it being a statement." "Let's be boring," I said. "Right now." We put the mail back in a pile and laid our heads on our folded arms like schoolgirls until the kettle clicked and we were women again. Later, when the baby was finally big enough to watch the world without blinking it away, I took her to the park at dusk. The swings rattled with somebody else's kids. The sky decided on pink. I strapped her to my chest and walked the path we used to take when we were girls with scraped knees. "You're old enough for one true thing," I told her. My voice sounded simple, which felt right. "Your name came from the bravest woman I know. Bravery doesn't always look like charging. Sometimes it begins with telling the worst story out loud and then doing the dishes." She patted my collarbone with a small, damp hand like she had opinions about dishes. A breeze went through the trees and didn't knock anything down. We stopped at the bench near the lamppost that flickers twice before it commits. Ruth joined us with 2 cups of ice cream and a spoon for me. "Don't share the chocolate," she warned solemnly. "I'm practicing boundaries." "I heard you're good at those," I said. "Getting better," she said, and we ate without talking for a minute because the world had given us something sweet and we were finally greedy in the right direction. On the way home, I tucked the quilt over Ruthie's legs and clicked off the lamp only after the hallway learned our feet again. The porch light hummed its old, faithful hum. I dialed the dimmer 2 notches lower than before. Back in the living room, I took her hand, those long little knuckles Ruth loved, and squeezed once to see if she'd answer. She squeezed back without missing. Ruthie's fingers wrapped mine, small and sure, and the house, our house, the one with the light we would keep on, felt steady again.